sort of research that I'm doing, looking at why people aren't, organisations and companies aren't talking about their sustainability story. So this is phenomenon actual greenwashing. We thought about greenwashing, now there's greenwashing. I've been reading quite a few articles recently. Surveys have been done by them that show that companies are not talking about what they're doing. And so trying to find out why is quite interesting to me. Obviously, in my business, working, offering PR to every company, I don't know what they're talking about it, but they might not be calling me. I'm Caroline Astrop. Firstly, I have to say, talks by Linda and Aaron have been fascinating. I've learnt loads myself. It's a whole, psychology, it's a whole incredible, I like that, it's fascinating. Into hours. And it is so important for developing our communications and being able to persuade people to change their behaviour and change their attitudes. It's underpinned everything. So yeah, thank you to Linda and Alan, that's great. I'm coming in last. I'm Caroline Astrop. I run a company called Green Spark Marketing, and I'm a specialist in communications and PR for sustainability. I'm based in Stroud. Pure accident that I ended up in Stroud, but quite good, as you know. Stroud is quite a green hotspot, which does give me interesting opportunity to study the extreme end of sustainability communications, as well as working a lot with people who are not involved in sustainability at all over the years. Who am I? Well, I have been working in the sustainability sector since 1985. I was one of those weird people at the time who nobody really took much notice of. My nickname in the pod was Janet Planet. I can certainly relate to what a lot of Linda said. It's like, oh God, Janet Planet's off again on that subject. Oh, so I know Aaron and Linda talked about defining moments and what put them on the journey to their work in sustainability. I suppose for me, it was when I was actually 9 years old. And I watched a programme about a man who had a stream, a river at the bottom of his garden where otters were living, and the programme was all about how he studied otters, and I just suddenly thought, that's what I want to study wildlife for the rest of my life. I want to study animals. I've always been passionate about animals since being a child. And by 13, I decided I wanted to work in wildlife conservation. So I then went on to be a zoologist. I'm a zoologist ecologist by background, so I'm a scientist by background, that has influenced the fact that I feel it's really important that all communications have got to be underpinned by your evidence base, by the facts, in order to maintain credibility. Because we're really dealing with all sorts of different viewpoints and different stands on the subject, but you have to be able to underpin what you're saying with the evidence and the facts. I've worked for a whole variety of environmental organisations, the RSPB. I'm down here because I got a job as President PR Officer of the Wildfire and Wetlands Trust. I was up in the northeast in Newcastle upon Tyne before that. I am an Northerner by background. I was Chief Executive of Stroud Valleys Project, which is an environmental charity working with communities in the Stroud district. I did that for 13 years. I've been at BBC. I've been an environmental journalist as well, so I worked up through local radio. I was a reporter on Radio Gloucestershire's Countryside programme. We did win a Sony Awards Best Magazine programme in the country at the time. And then I went on to work at the Natural History Unit as a producer of news programmes about natural history and the environment for Radio 4. That programme was out quite a few years ago, and don't get me started on how Radio 4 just really doesn't cover natural history or the environment in their current scheduling. Part and cost of the earth. So yeah, I've got a lot of experience in sustainability. Last year, I filled a maternity cover for an environmental charity called Carbon Copy, which highlights fantastic work being done by the communities to tackle the climate crisis and to find solutions. So that's a really good. You want to have a look at Carbon Copy's website. They've got over 1,000 case studies there of communities and local level action. And their whole remit was to be positive, was to emphasise it's positive. Okay, it's terrible, but look, here's what's actually being done, and you too can copy it. And that's the idea behind it. So that was fantastic, working for handling their comms and events management for 10 months. And that included working on the Running Out of Time, which was a relay which ran from Glasgow right through to COP27. Thousands of ordinary people running 10-kilometre stretches all that way in order to carry a message about the climate crisis from young people to world leaders at COP27. So yeah, that was great fun. So quite a bit of background there in communications. Although I'm a scientist, I always was drawn to communications and trying to persuade people about the problems and get them to change their behaviour. The scientists, wonderful though they are and do incredible work, not known really for their communication skills. And I think for me that's part of the problem why we still have a communications issue at the moment with sustainability, because a lot of it has been based on scientists talking as scientists know how to do, which is not necessarily what resonates with people down at the mainstream level. I mean, Aaron earlier showed those two wonderful examples of the description of sustainability at the sort of top level by scientists and by the UN, and that sort of figures it. So I'm going to look a bit more down at the practicalities of it, into the marketing and the PR side of it, your communications, and into the storytelling, and giving you some tips about actually how to craft a good story. So whatever it is you're talking about, there are certain principles which are the same. So just to begin with, there are lots and lots of surveys done because the corporate world is very interested in this, whatever you might think. Obviously, they're driven by what they see as their customer demands, so they do a lot of research work into attitudes, into sustainability by the public. And there are lots of surveys out there showing things like 73% of consumers prefer to buy from a company demonstrating their green commitments.
Is that UK or worldwide?
That one's worldwide, that particular survey. Another survey said 65% of customers feel they should purchase items that are good for the environment and society as well. And then Nielsen, which is one of the leading companies in market research, carried out a survey called Consumers Buy the Change They Wish to See in the World. And they found that 81% are wanting companies to be offering goods and services which are more sustainable and which are better for people and for the planet. And obviously there's the assumption that it's all driven by the young people, and I'm very interested. I was fascinated to hear about your experience, Hannah. But the finding of this survey showed that this actually wasn't the case, that it was quite evenly spread throughout all the different age groups. So you have your millennials there. They thought 85% of them thought that companies should be doing everything they could to reduce their impact upon the planet. But 79% of Gen Z said that. I can I can never remember the years where these different groups are born. Oh, anyway, they're the generation before the millennials, basically. Baby boomers, I can relate to that one. They're born up to 65. 54 to 65, I think. 72% of them said that. And then the older generation, given a very unflattering term of the silent generation, because most older people I know, senior citizens I know, are anything but silent. But 65% of them felt that companies should be doing everything they could to reduce the impact on the planet. So it is quite evenly spread when you actually get down to detail, actually ask people directly what they think about it. And it's not just consumers. We found in the B2B world, the business-to-business world, actually 43% of particularly small companies are being asked about their sustainability credentials by the bigger companies higher up the supply chain. And those big companies are setting their sustainability strategies, and they are realising that they have to push that down the supply chain because of these things called, what you don't know, Scope 3 emissions. Those are your carbon dioxide emissions, which are not, that you can't be directly responsible for. So there is a lot of pressure coming from all sorts of directions for sustainability. It also, as well, does give you a fantastic chance of communications and getting publicity if you handle it in the right way. This is a company that's a renewable energy company called My Power. They design and install solar panel systems for the commercial world. They're based up near Tewkesbury. And this was an interesting story because it was when the feed-in tariffs were abolished for renewable energy. And of course, the environmental sector going, that's absolutely terrible. No feed-in tariffs, it's going to kill the demand for renewable energy. My Power came up and went, do you know, we're actually quite glad. We're really glad that the feed-in tariffs have been abolished. Because for us, this is actually putting off companies from adopting solar energy and renewable energy because the red tape is just so bad that they just don't even think about it. So we're actually glad feed-in tariffs are going. But that piece on Points West They did actually also interview Good Energy, Julia Davenport, who's the chief executive of Good Energy, and looked at it on the domestic side, and she said, well, actually on the domestic side, no, it's not good news. So this is one point to take away, in that there are different viewpoints of the story. Get your viewpoint clear. But if you wanted to get publicity, it might be good looking at all angles of the story and working with other organisations and partners to put forward other viewpoints to create a full story, particularly for the media. Because the media, particularly the BBC, with everything about the BBC, having been trained by the BBC and worked with BBC journalists, I know they are really keen. They really focus themselves on trying to present all sides of the story. So they do feel that obligation that they have to put different sides across. They're public service broadcaster, and all journalists are supposed to be reporting viewpoints, not necessarily passing opinions. Do you get the commentators and the analysts? That's a different ballgame. The thing to remember about when you work with journalists, though, is that the local regional journalists are very different to the nationals. The regional journalists, they're really helpful. They really want to help organisations, particularly down at community level, charities, to get their message across and to be positive. They're not scary at all. Nationals are a completely different kettle of fish. Boy, that's like jumping into a tank full of sharks when you start dealing with national journalists. But if you ever want to get a story across and you want to approach your local journalists, just remember that they're really nice people and they really want to help and support. But they do have to make sure that what they're reporting is factual. This is why I go back to the evidence base. Just wanted to talk a little bit about my side of psychology. Linda's talked about her side, which is a fascinating subject. But I'm looking at the psychology now, particularly about crafting your messages and your stories when you're going out to take your story to the wider world. I use a particular survey that was a global survey, and it looked at how people respond to environmental messages. So this is very much practically based. So I like this because it has 4 personality types. There are theories, there are processes out there which use lots of different personality types. There's one that uses 16. It's like, for heaven's sake, if this is a whole new area to you, you can't grapple with 16, whereas this has got 4, which I think are really easy for people to get their heads around. Excuse the pun. It's called Rethinking Consumption. It's Consumers and the Future of Sustainability, and it's about consumers. However, I think the personality types that it identifies can be applied to anything. To any organisation, to charity, community group. Whenever you're crafting a story, I think you can use this, and it will help you to get your messages across. It looks at what would persuade people to buy green. 75% said that they would buy it if the product or service performed as well as their normal one. And I do feel that in the sustainability sector, there's a feeling that if it's a sustainability offering, then people can buy it, and it's all right if it doesn't quite perform less. They have to accept it because it's good for the planet. Well, it's like, no, actually it has to perform as well as what people normally buy, or they won't buy it. 63% of people said they would buy the greener option if they knew why it was greener and what it was doing to be good to the planet. 64% said they would buy if they could be sure that the claims were true. This is where we get into all the greenwashing, and the Green Claims Code now has been brought in. It was brought in January last year, and this is being overseen by the Competition and Mergers Authority, and it is quite strong legislation around companies or any green claim being made. It has to be honest and substantiated. I mean, basically, there's a lot behind it, as you might imagine, but basically, to sum it up, it means if you can't prove it, don't claim it. Don't say it. If you can't prove it, don't say it. And 70% said they'd buy greener if it was the same price or cheaper as their normal option. So the 4 groups that this survey identified were, first of all, the advocates, which I think covers all of us here in the room, and a good part of Australia as well, I have to say. These are the people for whom being green is the most important thing. They want to save the planet, they want to reduce their own impact on the planet as much as possible, they want everybody else to do it. So basically, they're what's in it for we. They look at that wider good for society. These are your altruists. And I'm sure I don't need to explain this category to most of you here because we'll all fit into this one. The next group were aspirationals. Now, they formed 35% of the survey respondents in the UK. Now, your aspirationals, they want to do good, they don't quite know how to. But for them, being part of their peer group is most important. And this is why I was making comments earlier about understanding the evolution of people, where they come from. We're a tribal animal. Lots of people, for them, their peer group, being part of that tribe is what's really important to them. So they're looking at what their peer group are doing. They want to be accepted by their peer group. They want to do the same as their peer group. They want to be seen to be doing good by the rest of their peer group as well. So it's sort of like a two-way thing. The aspirationals, shopping are their favourite pastime. These are possibly the type of people who the advocates will look down on and accuse them of being shallow. But as I was making a comment earlier, I think, judging people is just absolutely, well, it's the right way to alienate people. So I really feel that we don't. So they're keen to know how it would help the wider society and their community, but it's also what's in it for me. How do I personally benefit from this as well? So when engaging the aspirationals, you really need to start up thinking about getting influence involved. Who are the people that they, within their tribe and their community, do they listen to? Who've got key voices? Who are your leaders, if you like? And when you're talking to them, you have to talk about how it helps the planet, but also how they personally will benefit from it. Then we have the practicals, who are actually the biggest percentage of respondents, and they are what's in it for me first. So they're not opposed to being green, but they're not actively searching it out. They're interested in whatever it is it cost efficient? Is it value for money? Does it do the job they want it to do? Does it make their life easier? Are they going to benefit in some particular way? And if that, whatever it is also good for the planet as well great, they'll be happy because they've ticked both boxes. But for them, it's the personal benefit particularly that matters. And then 18% with indifference. They just don't want to know it. All this stuff is environmental stuff, so they're nonsense. There is nothing such thing as society. Individuals have got to look after themselves. You're really not going to get them on board until there's no choice, until everything's greener and they've got no choice but being green. These sort of climate deniers, basically, who don't want any change to the status quo. And I heard a really interesting programme, it was an article I was reading about conspiracy theorists. And, psychologists are trying to understand what drives conspiracy theorists. And basically, they just don't see anything that they can think of that will change their mind. There was one. The only way that the psychologists have found at the moment of changing their opinions is that they took a group and this group voluntarily went through a weekly course of about 4 months. And I can't remember what the subject was. It might have been vaccination. There might have been anti-vaxxers. And at the end of that time, they were coming around going, yeah, actually, maybe we have got it wrong. But it took that amount of effort to change their minds. So indifference, just forget about them. Really. You're banging your head against a brick wall. That's 18%. If you concentrate on your advocates and your aspirationals, you've got over half of the population or half of your target group. So these groups as well aren't particularly related to age or socioeconomic backgrounds. These are personality types and how they respond to environmental messages, environmental subjects. So just for a couple of minutes, I just want us, after I've taken you through that, I just want you to think that, because obviously you're here because you want to communicate about sustainability. Just for a couple of minutes, think about your target group. Because the key thing in communications and telling your story to bring about a change, because I'm sure that's why we're all in this subject, we want to make a change for the better for the planet and for people as well, is getting your target audience really clearly understood. That's where all marketing, all PR starts from, understanding your target audience. So just for a couple of minutes, sit down, just scribble and just think about your target audience. Who is it you're really going out to? And which one of these groups do you think that they would fall into? And therefore, what type of stories might they want to hear about most? Okay, so bear that in mind as we go through the rest of the presentation then. So, what I want to go on to next is just, do you want to wait until the lady who's doing the filming comes back? Actually, okay, I'll just carry on then. Okay, this is a few tips for creating really inspiring green PR and communications.
Yeah, we could think.
I know sometimes communications and PR and storytelling can all seem a little bit like, whoa, it's a dark art, seem, a bit sort of overwhelming. So I love this quote from a lady with a great name, Babette Buster. But then when you realise that she's a story consultant to Disney, Pixar, and all the major film studios, you go, okay, maybe I understand why she's got a flamboyant name like that. But she now goes around the world training people in how to tell their stories beautifully, effectively. And she says, everyone has a story to tell. I have never known anyone to fail at learning how to tell their story beautifully. Storytelling is elemental within each of us. Storytelling is how we used to communicate. Think back before the time of paper was invented, before pens were invented. It was by telling stories. Even those cave paintings are telling a story. I can just imagine the Stone Age people sitting around the campfire and telling stories about their latest hunt, things like that. It is absolutely part of us. We all respond to it. And this is why you might have noticed in recent times a lot more of the news coverage is including people who can give their own personal experiences or comment on something, because it's all part of that storytelling and bringing in personal storytelling. Because in PR marketing, we use this phrase that people buy from people. We are hardwired evolutionarily to respond to other people. And lots of studies have shown this by the way people respond to images of faces and expressions in studies. That affects how they then feel and how they think. So preparation, really important. It's really easy to go, right, okay, we've got to write a press release, or we've got to write a story for the parish newsletter or whatever. You just sit down and start writing. But no, preparation is absolutely the key to it. And the first thing, funny enough, is to start at the end. What is it you want to happen as a result of this piece of communication? We call it in the business call to action, the CTA, the call to action. You always make sure whatever you create, you have a call to action. What do you want people to do? And it might not be something like attending a meeting. It might be encouraging to think about what you're doing or what you can change. But think about what you want to happen as a result of the communication. And also think about who will help you to achieve this. Because maybe you get more power by doing something joint with another organisation, or actually getting an influencer within your community, thinking about those aspirationals. If you know there's an influencer within your community who feels the way you do, maybe it's better that they write the articles of the parish newsletter from their point of view. That might have more weight then with the readers. So think laterally about how you're doing this piece of communication. And think about your target audience. I'm going to keep hammering on about this because it is the most important thing. Think about the target audience and where they're going to be in terms of understanding of the subject. Do you need to go back to square one and make sure you explain it from scratch in your piece of communication? Are they quite knowledgeable so you don't have to do all that initial explaining? You can go straight into what the problem is. Think about that really importantly. And another thing I just think is interesting to know about, how many of you here, amongst your friends, how many of you have got friends you spend time with who you think are not environmentalists? Good, great, fantastic. Great, because I tend to, particularly coming from Australia, I tend to find environmentalists spend their time with environmentalists, which is not helping that. Trying to understand your target audience.
this was just a campaign I worked on when I was at the Wildfowl and Wetlands Trust, when I was running their national campaigns. Pond Watch was a campaign that we wanted to tell people, look, 75% of ponds in the wider countryside have been destroyed. And we want you to do something about it. You can help by building your own pond, caring for your pond for wildlife, learning about ponds. So we actually split the target audience into different groups. So we had community groups, we had farmers, we had companies and businesses, and we had schools. So we produced different resources for those different groups, trying to understand where they were on the scale of understanding about ponds, and then trying to give them the resources that A, meant they could learn about it, or B, actually help them to do something practical. So it was a case of trying to understand different viewpoints and different levels of understanding. It was great in the end, because I managed to get a mailing list of about 150,000 people who were all really fascinated to look after their ponds for wildlife. I managed to get letters from people who were just to want to tell me about the first frogs they've seen in their pond that season, so that was absolutely fantastic. So Pond Watch went really well, and then we thought, okay, we're going to extend that to wetlands generally, because wetlands are obviously a lot of problems too. But the first thing that I did was I commissioned a company in university to do some market research to understand what people thought about wetlands, and it was fascinating. We found that people generally thought that wetlands were nature gone wrong. That we needed to do something with it. If we had a wetland, we need to do something proper with it. So going straight into the campaign saying, hey, you can save wetlands, people have gone, why? Whereas with ponds, that's what I did. I just launched straight into saving ponds, because people had garden ponds. There was a village pond. People knew frogs. People knew dragonflies. The knowledge was already there about what it was we were asking, or what the issue was, and therefore it was a much easier ask for people as to what they should do. Wetlands, we had to start from scratch. So we actually launched the campaign at a really plush restaurant down in London, and we got an up-and-coming chef then to create a buffet and using ingredients that come from wetlands. So it was obviously some fish, prawns, whatever, but things like carrots. For example, carrots originated as a wetland plant. So it was looking at that, it was making that connection in what people understood in everyday terms around wetlands. Unfortunately, I only worked on that campaign for about 6 months, because then I got the job at the BBC's Natural History Unit, and Wildfowl and Wetlands just didn't carry on with the wetlands campaign, which is a little shame. So put yourself in the shoes of whoever it is you want to talk about, which is partly why I was asking you to think about if you know people who are not what you call environmentalists. That's why I found going to that local pub great, although they call me Janet the Planet, and some of them I still see them go, oh, hi Janet. It was great because there were a whole group of people who weren't environmentalists, and then I could help me to understand how they would perceive the whole subject. I like going into Costa's. People go, oh my gosh, you have to go to Costa's. But it's full of ordinary people. It's really great to sit there and listen to what they're talking about. It's really good to look at news items on the internet or social media, whatever, to get an understanding of what people are talking about and what's really driving them. So again, you can try and match it with what really matters to them. So in marketing, and PR particularly, you sort of say, well, what is the benefit for me? It comes back to this, what's in it for me? What benefit is the target audience going to get from what it is I'm talking about? And we have so much we can talk about sustainability. We've got all the health issues, the well-being, waste, pollution. There's so much we can talk about other than saving the planet. My challenge to you is to try and capture communications, unless you're talking to advocates. Try and see how you can talk about it in terms of not saving the planet, because that makes that personal resonance with people. And there's a lot of debate, as you hear this morning from Linda and Aaron and myself, around, are we intrinsically selfish? I think we are. I would say go and buy a book called Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And I realised I haven't got a copy at home, so after this workshop, I'm going down to Waterstones to buy a copy of The Selfish Gene. But Richard Dawkins is one of the really leading evolutionary biologists, and it talks about how our genes drive our behaviour. And so there are three groups he puts people into. One group are the altruists, who want to help everybody they come into contact with. One are the cheaters, who want to actually get personal, they're just interested in themselves. And then there's a middle group, I can't remember the name of them, but they just learn, you know, okay, oh, you're an altruist, therefore if I'm nice to you, you'll be nice to me, so I'll be nice to you. You're a cheater, right, you just want stuff from me. I'm therefore not going to cooperate with you. I really firmly believe there is a real evolutionary genetic basis to how we behave. I have written an article on LinkedIn, it's still on LinkedIn, called The Personality of Politics. And lots of research showing that actually people's political inclinations based to genetics and how that affects personality. Conservatives go back to fear. Linda was talking about a lot of research with people who vote Conservative show that actually they're quite fearful of the outside world. They're fearful of change because of possible direct benefits, which again I link back to that survival instinct. So really, really think about where your target audiences are. Really try to understand them and get under their skin. Again, feeds back to what Linda was saying, that helps you to understand and then form really good conversations with them. And we must get away from this preaching to people and the assumption that if you don't care about the planet, you know, you are a bad person. We all hate being told we're a bad person. We're all ultimately good people. We're all looking after our mothers and sending cards on Mother's Day. We're all being nice to our neighbours when we can. You know, we don't want to be thought of as being a bad person. A lot of people are not doing sustainability because they simply don't know about it. So yeah, just you know, walk a mile in your ideal customer's shoes. You know, how much do they understand about it? How is it relevant to them personally? And therefore you can form the messages that you need in order to really press their green action buttons. Be truthful. We all know about greenwashing. You know, there's evidence that shows people really, really do not react well to greenwashing. They feel that a company or something they've been told is just not true, and they really don't like it. So you have to walk the walk, and that includes, I think, on a personal level as well for us. You know, you probably come across it if you're trying to talk to somebody about being sustainable, and they go, "Well, what are you doing then?" You know, we do have to also individually, as well as at a corporate level or charity level, where, you know, we do have to walk the walks. And I'm not perfectly sustainable, and I'm quite honest about that because I don't think it's possible to be perfectly sustainable in this world. There was a family in Stroud who they went on holiday to Greece. They found themselves swimming in what they described as a plastic soup. Basically, they went swimming on the sea, as you do when you Greece. Oh, lovely blue sea, let's go for a swim. So much plastic in the sea. That was one of their defining moments, and they came back and went, okay, we're going to have a year without any plastic. Fair play to them. Clowdy Williams, if you ever come across Clowdy Williams, yeah, and she went on to start Stroud's District Action on Plastic. But even she says, we can only be 95% plastic free because, particularly around the medicine events in the world, and we just can't be plastic free. And we shouldn't demonise plastic. It has got a really good use. It is so ubiquitous for a reason. So the other thing I would say is that if you're talking about why you should have something, think about what does it replace? Is it simply because it's cheaper and more convenient for a company to use, or is it actually there for a reason? You know, we used to have a wool carpet in our front room, completely decimated by carpet moss one season, absolutely decimated. I will never have a wool carpet again. Might be sustainable, but unless I have a wool carpet that's coated with the chemical that stops the clothes moth eating it, I will go for the nylon carpet, thank you very much. And that's because I can't afford to keep replacing my carpets every year. So think about why something is the way it is, and ask, you know, are people choosing this option for perfectly reasonable reason, they can't afford to keep replacing all the carpet every year. So think about that. And then planning. So when we're creating a story, this is the basic formula that PR communications people use. This is a little poem from Rudyard Kipling's poem, The Elephant's Child. I keep 6 honest serving people. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and where and when, why and how, and how and why and who. I would add to that my own one is I put wow on the end. So we have 6 W's and an H. So your story, when you're creating it, has got to answer all those. And then the wow that I put on the end is it's that sort of fact that what will make somebody go, oh, that's interesting. What will stop them in their tracks as they're reading and go, oh. People tend to skim, as first couple of sentences, do I read the rest of this? So get that wow into the first couple of sentences. That thing that will make them think, I'll read the rest of this there. And wow. You need to make facts and emotions. As I said, I think one of the problems why sustainability communications hasn't done as well as it could have done in the past few decades is that it's being talked about a lot by scientists who are very good in facts, but they haven't done the emotions. And we do need to put the emotions in, as Linda was referring to earlier. But be careful not to overdo them. We're very good in the sustainability world talking about how it's all tragic. The very last tree in the world being chopped down is an absolute catastrophe. But lots of people might be going, well, you're talking about, these trees down the bottom of my street being chopped down. It's such a catastrophe, but actually there's that really big woodland just over there. So keep a sense of proportion. But emotions are really, really vital because they're what makes a link with people. They're really what get people fired up about a subject. So mix the two. So think about what are the human right-brain aspects of your sustainability commitments, the people stories, the emotions, and also think about what are the non-human left-brain aspects, the practical details, the facts. And tell your story warts and all. As we said, nobody can be perfect in terms of sustainability. There'll always be somebody who wants to pull you up on it. So it's like, yeah, okay. And if a company's going through the move towards being more sustainable, it's thought that one reason why we're getting greenwashing is that companies are sort of feeling like, well, I can't talk about being sustainable because we're not perfectly sustainable yet. We haven't implemented all of that strategy yet. And I'm like, well, actually, take people through the journey. A lot of companies, like I think it was Unilever years ago, they went, okay, we're going to be sustainable. We don't know how yet. We haven't a clue how we're going to do it yet, but we're really committed to doing this. So, and if you take people through the whole experience, then they can learn as well. If something goes wrong, go, yeah, okay, it went wrong. We've done this research and we thought it was going to work, but it hasn't. So this is what we're going to try instead. People trust you more when you're honest and open about making mistakes. And don't tell the whole story all at once. Again, because we're also passionate and care about the subject a lot. We want to tell everybody everything about the subject all at once. And I'd say, why we're not talking about climate change is that it's so massive. When people read a piece of information, they can only take away 1 or 2 messages at the most from that piece of information. If you're telling them everything there is to know about climate change, then they're just going to switch off at the end. Because again, psychological research shows that, if we feel too overwhelmed by something and all too awful, then people just switch off completely and won't think about it at all. They'll go do something else. So pick 1 or 2 things to talk about. And so, PR campaigns are planned in phases. So we'll think, okay, we've got this overall big story, but for this period of time, we're going to concentrate on this aspect of it. And then the next 6 months, we're going to talk about that aspect. So you'll do more good by talking about clear things. As I've been around in the sustainability sector for so long, I remember when the whole talk was about the hole in the ozone layer because of CFCs. That actually got resolved really quite quickly in terms of time. once it was realised it was CFCs that were to blame, there was a lot of drive then from companies and governments to ban CFCs and to find alternatives. And that was because it was really easy. We're getting this hole in the ozone layer, it's because of CFCs. Humans can cope with that. They can cope with easy cause and effect. So keep that message succinct. I sort of talk about like thinking of chapters of a book. I did actually once try to read the original. There was a reprint of Moll Flanders, the book, and it was printed in the original way it had been printed, and there are no chapters. And I don't even seem to remember there being very many paragraphs as well. I say after a while, I just gave up. So it was too much. So break up your story into chapters and tackle each chapter at a time, and then people can take it in and go, oh, that's the problem. Oh, and that's what you want me to do about it. Oh, actually, I can do that. So break it into chapters, but remember your call to action. So, for example, this was a company just outside Gloucestershire border in Worcestershire, Crumpleberry. There was a farm. They redid that whole business, reimagined that whole business, and they turned it into a venue centre, a conference venue centre, but wanted to make it as sustainable as they possibly could. So they could go out and say, hey, we're the Sustainability Venue Centre, that's why you've got to book us. But that as a story, it's just so big that people go, they can't grasp it. It's like, so what? But if you break it down to what they were doing, into individual chapters, it's incredible. So they were responsible land managers, and it was family owned and run. And they said they were farming for the future and could talk about how they were doing that. The energy consumption had been made as efficient as possible. How do they do that? What are the different aspects of it? So your advocates would be really interested in the fact that they made it as efficient as possible, which is really good for the planet because it's really cut the CO2 emissions. Your practicals would be really interested in like, oh yeah, well, how have you done that? What about that wood chip boiler? Because they used biomass heat generation. They grew the timber on the estate and chipped it and put it into the heat generation. Oh, your practicals would love that. They'd love all the information about the wattage, the volume of wood chips gone in, all that sort of stuff. They would love how efficient it was. And your aspirations would be going, hey, this looks like a really cool place to be. This looks like one of the in places. And, they've got this really great energy thing, because it's all really efficient, so you've covered all sorts of bases in one go with that. Planting and managing the woodlands. Again, they can talk about how that is good for the biomass heat generation, but also for biodiversity. So they could use that to go, hey, when you come and use our place as a venue for your event, you've got a lovely woodland that you can go and enjoy as well, when it's that tea break or lunch break, or if you're there for a couple of days after the end of the day, come and relax by walking through our lovely woodland. You can use it, talk about it in different ways. You can talk about the composting, the environmental policy, the fact that staff are involved in putting it together. The staff job descriptions they had put in, and this was really quite advanced at the time, they had put in a responsibility for being sustainable in everybody's job description. So it wasn't just the sustainability team that was responsible for it. Everybody had a personal role to play. Rainwater House. You can see the whole, if you start looking at it and breaking it down to chapters, there is so much to talk about, and it's also so much easier to understand what is meant by saying that they are a sustainable venue. One of my golden rules as well is don't treat the public as if they're stupid, because they're not. They often just don't know about something and they don't understand it. And none of us like being treated as stupid. Because we're not. So then delivery. So think about the start. When you're at the start, get everybody involved. Because everybody's got a different level of understanding. They've got different things they know. Everybody can input something different into your story. They can put their own experiences into your story. So start getting PR involved right at the beginning of a project when you're planning it. Because so often the PR people are brought in right at the end, and you go, I was asked to promote the awarding of some sustainability awards a few years ago. The awards ceremony was 5 o'clock on a Friday evening. It's like, you really expect me to get any journalists there 5 o'clock on a Friday evening? But if they brought me right in at the start, the very planning, I could have said, don't do it, that's one of the worst possible times that they're in. When I was a press officer at Slimbridge, I used to go to the research department's coffee breaks every morning, mid-morning coffee break. Because all the researchers would pile into the coffee, and I knew that's where I could get hold of people and talk to them and hear the stories. And by doing that, I heard that the aviculturalists had hand-reared a hummingbird chick for the first time in the world. So I hot-footed it down to the aviculturist and went, oh my God, this is a fantastic story. I mean, you can imagine how cute baby hummingbird chick would look. And I went, why didn't you tell me? I didn't think anybody'd be interested. Oh, you know, I got that on the 6 o'clock news, BBC, ITV, national papers, you know, it was a massive story. And they'd done something incredible, it just showed what skilled people they were. But, you know, so get the PR involved right at the start of the planning and get everybody involved, because everybody has a role to play. You know, when I talk to companies, I say, for heaven's sake, remember your receptionists. Receptionists are always the last people to know what's going on, but they're also the first people that are contacted by the outside world. And it doesn't make you look good if your receptionist goes, And then think about every touch point where you can guess, this is again why you have to think about your target audience, you know, where are they, what do they read, what do they listen to, what publicity channels can you use to get your message out to them. And I'll send this round as well, with Linda's presentation, exactly we'll send out our presentation round after this workshop. Just think about everything. So for 2 days a week, I'm helping Stroud Brewery with their PR. And just recently, we've been nominated. In fact, the closing date's 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. So please go on So Gloss website and vote for Stroud Brewery as best pub in Gloucestershire. Please. But we've got to, as part of being nominated or as a finalist, you have to get people to vote for you. So I've had to think about every possible way. So it's not just social media. It's, you know, it's posters in the toilet, backs of toilet doors, great places for posters, particularly, well, in the ladies' saloon particularly. We always have to sit down. You have to sit down, so you know you're staring at the back of the toilet door. They've got the tap room there, so we've got leaflets on tables. Leaflets can go out with their web orders. You know, think about every possible way you can to get information out there, and it's not just social media and a press release. So this is just a little chart I use just to find out what PR skills are within a client I'm working with, and whether you feel okay handling certain things or whether you feel that a certain skill that you can do getting help with. And if you're a community group, charity, you know, you can usually find somebody to volunteer if something you don't really feel comfortable with, like, you know, sort of media or something, you know, it's a great type of thing. Again, you know, charities often say, oh, come and volunteer with us, but it's like, well, what does that mean? You know, how much time was it going for? What do you want to do? You know, so, yeah, when you ask volunteers, ask for specific things. And the timetable, when you've got your story you want to communicate, put the timetable together. You know, what period of time is this going to cover? And are there any things that you can make the most of? You know, all these national days that we've got, people always sort of ridicule it, but for journalists, it's a great excuse to actually talk about that particular subject. So if there's a national day that you can be involved with, for example, I was listening to Radio Gloucestershire, the wonderful Anna King, her mid-morning programme a few months ago, and she said, well, apparently today is National Toilet Day. Do you know, I don't have a clue how I'm going to talk about National Toilet Day, but one of the listeners then emailed and went, actually, have you thought about toilet twinning? Fantastic way of getting a promotion for that really good cause. So don't rubbish these national days, because in PR terms they are great. National Beer Day is coming up on the 15th of June, and I'm going to be launching a new guide that Stroud Brewery's put together about, is an introduction for pubs about how they can embrace sustainability. And this is for pubs that are not being sustainable yet. It's an easy step-by-step guide of things that they can do to sustainable. So these are day. Oh, you know, is there anything going on in your locality that you can use? So think laterally. So, you know, maybe just an example, and then International Carrot Day. Oh, this is a good one. 100 Days of Christmas is in September. You know, if you've got anything linked to September or gifts or, you know, whatever, things like that are always good. Journalists like days, you know, they're like 10th anniversary, 25th anniversary. You know, think about things like that. That's just me. That's all, folks. Any questions?